Chapter 15. Point of view, Plague Marshal, Elias Vex. What do you mean? It has broken quarantine again? Plague Marshal Vex asked through gritted teeth. Well, sir, Hadrin stammered. We have a confirmed case in the Tavern District, and that's outside. I damn well know what a break in quarantine means, you twit, Vex yelled. He forced calm onto his face. Hadrin was doing his best. He was a good adjunct, and Vex was lucky to have him. No, this wasn't his fault. It wasn't the soldiers' fault, and it wasn't an error with the ward crews. The plague spread for the same reason that murder was committed over a few coppers. The spire-damned peasants couldn't see beyond their own selfish desires. If he were honest about it, it probably wasn't their fault either. They didn't have the breeding for it. He would no more expect a dog to lay silver dinnerware around its meal before tearing its fellow's ear off to ensure it had its fill. I am asking how it happened, Vex continued. Did someone sneak out to visit their poor grandmother? Did some daughter of the docks buy her exit by raising her skirt for a guard? I am asking, dear Hadrin, how we plug whatever hole the peasants are using to underwrite the complete collapse of the city where they live and the economy that keeps them from starving. Hadrin steeled his features and looked just above Vex's eyes. Vex could always tell when he feigned eye contact, and he hated it and found it charming in equal parts. Respectfully, sir, the administration of the quarantine has been the best I've seen. I know this is your first outbreak as marshal, but this has been my fifth as an adjunct. Protocol has been followed very tightly. We followed any suspected exposure in the ranks with the 3-day observation period. Very few cases ended up being positive, and all of the infections were caught before the patient became symptomatic. Also, the burn crews have been thorough at your request. This earned a nod from Vex. A few cottages could be rebuilt eventually. Housing was limited in the slums of Harbor's Edge, but the citizens would eventually see that erring on the side of caution when eradicating grey rot was the right call. Any who wished to call his interpretation of plague procedure brutal could just look to the failure of containment as justification for taking the most conservative approach. It is a mystery, sir. It's as if it's being spread on purpose. Vex scoffed. You've seen the progression of the sickness. This has been going on for 3 weeks in the city. The infected die or are no longer contagious in 10 days. There would have to be a suicidal death cult dedicated to infecting someone, then sneaking them beyond the quarantine lines before they became symptomatic. We have been through this 100 times. That theory just doesn't make sense. No, it's a cultural problem, not a conspiracy. We need to tighten our controls, redouble efforts to ensure compliance. Have you told Barton yet? Hadrin paled and nodded. He was notified at the same time as us. We are going to have to pull wardens to help build the new ward line. His teams are pushed to the limit. I heard he has even tapped a greycoat with ward experience to help. Vex grimaced. A greycoat? I know things are desperate, but is it so bad we must lower ourselves enough to use a reject for such an important role? Things are quite dire, sir. We must use whatever means available to guarantee containment. The electors and prefects are agitated. We're going to have to close the whole Western Warehouse district, and that will affect every industry in the city. The garrison commander will requisition the eastern warehouses for Aegis use, so all private shipping will essentially be frozen. How long do we have until they find out? Vex asked. You already have 5 meeting requests, sir, Hadrin said with a wan smile. They are insisting that you visit each of their offices. Nonsense. I don't answer to local governments. They can come to me, and they can come all at once. We need to organize a new ward line, and we need to figure out how it's getting out. I agree. Our offices are now in the center of the new quarantine zone, however. You authorized my proposal for expedited command center relocation in the event of a confirmed quarantine breach, Hadrin said. So, we do not have a room to meet in, Vex said with a sigh. Not one with furniture, sir. So where? Vex began before he was interrupted by a knock at the door. Who is that? Hadrin opened the door and allowed 4 soldiers in, who lifted the 2 sitting chairs in front of the desk, while the other two took position on either side of Vex's desk, staring straight ahead. "Sir." "Your desk," Hadrin said, pointing at the soldiers. "This cog-fucking plague will be the end of me," Vex grumbled, standing up so the soldiers could lift his desk to be carried to the next location. He didn't want this job when it was assigned to him, and he certainly didn't want it now, but when the Aegis issued orders, it was past the point of negotiation. Ironic that he had worked so hard to avoid an assignment on the front lines, only to be sent back home to impose enough order on the filthy peasants for them to survive this disaster. If they had enough sense to follow his procedures, he would already be winding this operation down and heading back to Greyhaven to find who he needed to bribe to make sure he was never assigned plague duty again. He just needed to force this to work. If it came down to letting fire take a few tenement houses or burn his career, he could easily be convinced gentrification would benefit the dockside neighborhoods. "Tell them to suit up in plague gear, and they can meet with me while we oversee the command center transition," Vex said with a sly smile. "If I am going to be forced to walk through the muck, they can get their boots dirty as well." Elector Joff kept reaching to his brow as if he could wipe the sweat through the plague gear. Vex smiled at the fool. Politicians had so many opinions about how the Aegis should perform its duty until they walked a ward line while boiling in their own sweat. He strode forward as the officials peppered him with questions, ensuring their path caught whatever sunlight filtered through the fog that always blanketed the city. The tenement buildings towered on either side, blocking the wind so the heat of the afternoon couldn't be interrupted by the sea breeze. His suit was outfitted with an upgraded shard fan that filtered the air like a respirator but moved air through the suit from the small of his back. It didn't help with the smell, but it made the heat bearable. "And what of our employees?" the maritime prefect complained. "The Aegis provides rations inside the ward line, but many of them are out of work with the warehouse district shut." "Did the Aegis cause this plague?" "No. We aren't the guarantors of your businesses. We are protecting the city around our garrison. That is our concern. Perhaps you could set up an employee relief fund. Surely you and your fellow business owners have saved some of the profits from your businesses over the years." Vex stifled a chuckle at the sputtering sound that came through the man's respirator. "You mean from our private savings? Surely not." "Plague Marshal, perhaps I have a solution," Hadrin said. "Go ahead, Hadrin," Vex said, smiling. Hadrin always had good ideas. "If we took soldiers from logistics to help with the ward line," Hadrin offered. "We could hire some of the dock crews as temporary contractors. It would only be about a quarter of those left idle, though." "Perhaps we could rotate them in shifts," Vex mused. "But it would create unrest if they were only on quarter wages. I don't know." "Sir, perhaps the maritime prefect could offer to match the wages, offered from a charitable fund he could put together with the harbour masters," Hadrin said, picking up on Vex's direction. "This would really burn those smug bastards. It would certainly make them look less callous." Both he and Hadrin let the silence stretch. "Perhaps I could do something like that," the prefect conceded. Vex smiled broadly as he nodded, knowing it was obscured by his mask. Hadrin scrawled furiously on his notepad in response. Knowing him, the man probably had the papers drawn up before the meeting even started. "This still doesn't address the rumors," Elector Joff insisted again. "Can it, Joff?" Vex said. "Your mother read you too many fairy tales at bedtime. We are educated people. I do not need to hear any more of Reapers and their wives running amok. Last I checked, even 5 and 6 bar officers were not immune to grey rot. Do you think some apparition is more powerful than one who climbed so high in the spire? The only way to spread grey rot is to have an active infection. There is about a 10-hour period where someone can be contagious before sores start breaking out. What you suggest would require someone walking around for weeks touching things. If you like, I can walk you to one of the Greycoats triage wards where they keep those suffering through days 6 through 8. They can't even stand." "That won't be necessary, Plague Marshal," Joff stammered. "But if the citizens believe it, and they see us doing nothing, it will cause unrest." "He's right, sir," Hadrin said, the goggles of his suit bobbing. "The psychological effects of an outbreak can lead to rioting. They need to feel safe. Vex wouldn't start a manhunt for a spectral woman from a nursery rhyme, but they had a point. The lowborn needed to feel like they were in control. They needed something to do. Most of them would do as they were told, following curfews and staying indoors. Those were the people they needed to keep calm. Put out procedures for the use of delousing powder. Get a few apothecaries to bottle it and label it a protection against infection. That will at least address the insect problem in the lower harbor. Post signs warning against disinformation, and have the wardens identify any of the organizers pushing the Reaper's wife narrative. Round them up and put them in a mandated quarantine. Don't charge them with a crime. We don't need them arrested, just quiet while we identify the actual culprit of the plague. The electors and prefects all nodded at this, agreeing with his methods. Also, burn everything along the new ward line. If anyone gets within 100 feet of it, from the outside or the inside, who isn't part of the Aegis, quarantine them with the infected. That should be sufficient deterrent for any who think to test our resolve. It's going to take a stiff spine to stop this plague. Greyhaven will see what I will do to get the job done.